Hello, everyone. I'm Kipp Snow. I'm the director of the Transportation Distribution Logistics Institute at the Community College of Baltimore County.
Hey, everybody. Mike Singer, community manager, Baltimore and Chesapeake Bay Shipwatchers. We're a local maritime advocacy group, and we do whatever we can to help promote things to do with the Port of Baltimore.
We said advocacy. We practice advocacy before we
did.
started.
I don't know what my issue is with that.
Awesome.
Yeah, it gives you something to give me crap about. That's okay.
You just could give it to me later, so it's fine.
Yeah. Comes and goes both ways. So we have this podcast, and we like to get some information out in a different manner. You know, we're on Facebook, and we're all over socials. But we wanted to have a way to get some data and some news about the port on a timely manner, something that folks can look forward to every week. Yeah. So here's our really cool. Now, I designed this, so of course I think it's really cool. But our Key Bridge logo that came up with like 2 years before the bridge went down. And somebody said, well, now you're going to need a new logo.
No, it's okay. I think it's now a classic logo now.
Right. Exactly.
I have to get me one of those.
Now, when you say one of those, do you mean a hat? Or
I need it. Yeah, I need to order it. Well,
I
got the bald head, so yeah. I got the bald head, so I really need the hat. So it's all good. All right, shipping updates this week in the port.
Yeah. So, we've been talking about every week about, how we're trying to get back to normal. And one key metric is that we've been covering a little bit each week is the truck transactions at Seager. Now, the truck transactions, this is something that the Port of Baltimore, in their socials, that they report about. As a matter of fact, I think it was this past week, they did a post. Hey, I think it was Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
No, Tuesday. Anyway, where they had 2,500 truck transactions in a day, which is a great thing, because, and we'll see this in a moment here, because the truck transactions were at least 3,000 per day pre-bridge accident. Sometimes 35. They would do around 33, 3,500, and I just know because there's a port truckers group or Facebook page that I follow, and I happen to pay attention to it, and
sure.
And then they would peak at like 4K. They would peak at like 4,000 every once in a while, and there were a couple of big ships in with a lot of imports. And so since then, it's been down in the teens.
Yeah.
So 1,300, 14, 15, 16. So here, let me see if I can share my screen. And I wanted to show everybody what the heck I'm talking about, so you can see it for yourself. Okay, here we go. I think that's okay. Mm-hmm. So, all right, I think that's the right one. So you can see here, we're gonna go back a month. Let's talk about the trends for the last month. So I went back 4 reports. So this is week ending July 20th, and so you can see here where the numbers are hovering around in the teens. So this comes out to just over 1,600 average per week. Okay, and let's go to the next one. So here's week ending the 27th. This is 1,900 a week. Week ending August 3rd, this averages out to just over 2,000 a week. We can see a nice trend here.
Yes.
And it's It's not just one giant ship came in and everything bumped up. I mean, you see that during the week. Of course, there's fluctuations.
Sure,
But
sure.
I just took the 5 Monday through Friday. I took the 5 days and averaged them out for the week. And then the last report that I have, which was actually from this past week, and you can see, well, Friday was down, but so now we're talking about 2,135 transactions per week. So we've gone from 16 to 2,100 in the course of 4 weeks.
That's a very nice general positive trend. You know,
Right.
it's not the exponential growth. Now, obviously, we would want everything to come right back up to the 4,000 on average. You know, the next day.
Absolutely.
But looking at that 4-week trend, that's a very nice, strong, constant. You know, growth. Well, let's keep adding pieces. You know, let's
Right. And I wanted to talk about this because I wanted to put it in a way that, folks can see. It's not just you and me talking about you and I talking about numbers.
right.
It's something that people can see for themselves. And then when we average it out per week, I mean, I think it's pretty plain to see that, of the trends. And I'm glad because what made me put this together was I thought maybe there was, some crazy peak week in there, and then it kind of went back down, and that's not happening. So that's great news. And then when we talk about ships that come in and are bringing in these kinds of numbers, now these are truck transactions, not container movements, and we'll have to get into that podcast number 18. I don't know. But I wanted to show the size of these ships.
Mm-hmm.
Now, interesting here is that, gosh, I should have this ready to go. Remember when we looked at the schedule, and we'll get into that later because I do want to show the schedule again.
This was the schedule that was linked from the Shipwatchers website out to Seagert Terminals or
Yes.
Ports America Chesapeake's calendar.
Exactly. Now, what I find a little bit interesting is that this ship is in the Evergreen group. So when we talk about looking at that schedule, and remember all the different colors, and it was for each different group of ships, or I forget what the term. Do you remember what the term is? I don't remember.
The class?
No, it's not the class. It's the company. There's another name. Anyway, for each different company that comes to town, they have their own color in the schedule. And I find it interesting that there's this ship that is on the Evergreen list, but it doesn't say Evergreen. It's like non-branded. And then when we get into that, so there's a whole class of ships. I don't know, 20 different ships that used to be the largest ships that come to the port of Baltimore, the largest container ships. And they're all like not branded like this. There's no Evergreen on the side. And do you know why that is? I would love to know why that is.
Yeah, so Evergreen didn't specify what was happening with this T-class of ships. So I did a little bit of research on that. I think in some situations, ships don't utilize marketing branding in order to be contracted out for for other operations. Very similar to the Dolly. So the Dolly had
Right.
was a contracted ship. In some cases, you do have ships that are owned by a particular steamship line, and they may contract out a whole ship or a portion of a ship for a contracted movement. But they didn't really.
Was she like a Maersk or Evergreen? Because she was contracted. She was being operated by or leased by one of the big names. I don't remember which one.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top on this one.
But just another example of what you,
correct. But yes, that is an example of how steamship lines may contract out portions of their ship or a whole ship in order to meet their revenue or to fill in space that may be open. But this T-Class ship is actually one step smaller than the Ever Forward or the Ever Given. We know those names.
They're smaller?
Yeah, this is one class smaller than that.
Okay.
There are 20 ships in the class, like what you said. They hold about 1,000 less containers than what the Ever Forward does. So it's just a slight difference. So they range anywhere from 13,800 TEUs to 14,400 TEUs in this T class. Top speed's about 23 knots. Overall length is 368 meters.
Right.
And these ships were built in the 2013 to 2017 time span. So, okay, so let's look at that as to reason why these are now the next to biggest class of ships. 2016 was when the Panama Canal opens up. Then all of these steamship lines are now building bigger ships in order that can now transit the Panama Canal to the East Coast. They can then go and build these bigger ships. So that's kind of where
those are 51 meters, right? 51 meters
across.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the importance of where these ships kind of fall in with all of the timing and the overall ship sizes. Cool. Approximate life is like 25 to 30 years, so you can understand where that lifespan is going to be. Here's an important nugget about the T-Class ships, though. In March of 2024, Evergreen started retrofitting this fleet of 20 ships to include a retrofitted, fully functioning carbon capture system. So
when did they start doing that?
They just installed the first one in March.
Oh,
and so
you're not talking about the previous 2020 scrubber that the exhaust. I
know. Yes. This is another system, and it's specifically for this particular class of ships because of the way that those ships were built. So this system uses amine absorbents to capture and separate the carbon, the CO2 from the exhaust coming directly from the ship. And then it compresses it and liquefies it during transit. And then once they come into a port, it's disposed of. So they're able to capture more than 80% of the carbon emissions, with the purity of the carbon emissions reaching 99%.
So when you say that, I mean, you got to be careful what you say to Mike, because then right? Because then, the brain just starts working. Okay, then where does that go? Then who takes care of that? Where does that wind up? What does this big, is it one of those kind of plastic tanks that you see on the back of a truck with the stuff sloshing around? And then that has to come off the ship, and that's handled by somebody like Davis Ship Service or whatever that does trash and all kinds of needs for the ship and parts and whatever they might need. So now we're getting down in the weeds, but my curiosity knows no bounds, right? So one day we'll have to figure out how does that happen, because I'm picturing an old scrubber, right? So you've got these vanes, right? And then they kind of tap down, and then the particulates fall down, and then it goes in a vat or a hopper, and then they've got to get rid of it. And where does that go?
Sure.
Okay, now you've got this stuff out of the air, but then where does that wind up? Anyway.
I'm glad I now have homework for Professor Mike here to. No, in general, your bunkering services can handle those types of operations, and I would imagine that Evergreen contracts with certain bunkering services that can provide that removal service for them. And it's done in an environmentally controlled and responsive manner. I'm sure that the EPA and whoever else is going to be involved, if it's a U.S. based transaction.
Because we know, for David Ship Service, I mean, we talk about regulated trash. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, it's kind of a big deal. I mean,
Right.
it just doesn't stuff just doesn't go anywhere or handled by anybody. So, yeah.
But I will do, because I just learned about this part of this particular
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. I'll do a little bit more research on this to see what the full process is for the CO2 removal. And
Mm-hmm.
now I'm curious to see what other ships may be looking at similar processes, because each ship is going to have, or each class of ship across all of the steamship lines are going to
Sure.
have some mechanism, to address CO2. So be
Right.
curious
And
to learn about this.
when we see the ships come in on the live stream camera, sometimes it's quite obvious that there's this big hulking square or rectangular thing on the back of the ship that
Yeah.
was obviously added after the fact. I always assumed it was about that 2020 exhaust requirement. And then, how does that work? Where does that stuff go? I'm sure it's handled properly, but just curious.
Sure.
Um,
All
so
right.
what's next? So just some little details. So 2 ships into Seagirt this week, coming up this week. So not now, but next week, I'm pretty sure, with over 1,000 imports each. So let's go to the schedule again. Let's see if I can pull this up. Okay. All right, that doesn't look right. Let's. Okay, so here we are at the website, BaltimoreShipWatchers.com, and I know I keep running through this, but I want folks to be able to. I think it's really cool that this information is public, and so we're
Yeah.
talking about it, but you don't. And it's great that you're listening to the podcast and you're interested, but I want people to be able to go and look at this information for themselves. So I want to make sure, and then uh, from the lessons learned from Facebook, that you may say something once and people aren't necessarily going to hear it or grab it. So
Right.
that's why I'm beating this thing to death. So you come over, so BaltimoreShipWatchers.com, come here to shipping links, go down to the third one, container ship schedule, and then you'll see that sometimes they actually have the amount of imports in here, right? So
Yeah,
there's
I noticed that in the previous ones you've pulled up.
right, and this is probably a little bit hard to see, but there's 1203 here on Sunday and Monday. And then further on in the week, here's 1169 on Thursday and Friday. So it's really cool to see those numbers, because we really haven't seen those numbers.
Sure.
And you can go back a month, and then, I know I'm probably weird, but look at how exciting this calendar is. Look at
Yeah.
all these days where there are a bunch of ships in port. I mean, to me, that's nothing but good news.
And I think that, this will also continue to correspond with the truck movement metrics moving, continuing to increase.
Mhm.
It's a direct correlation to this.
And I do want to continue tracking that for everyone, for us. And then one of the things, when we talked about the containers not getting back to normal, one of the biggest to get them to come back was the Evergreen line. And they just really weren't coming back. I mean, just a month or two ago, we were only getting 1 ship when we're normally getting 4 ships at, I don't know, 2,000 imports at a clip. Sometimes, not all the time. But
Sure.
but now we can look at and we can see, okay, here's green. Here's another green. Here's another one down here, and then I guess I lied, because that's a different color green, so it is a different line or service.
Okay.
But I loop them all together as
Sure.
they are all really evergreen ships. And then when we go to the next month,
The first week in September is already filling up.
yeah, I mean this is great to see. So now we've got 1, 2. Oh, look at this! The first week in September, 2 of these M-class Evergreen ships are going to be here the same week, 2 at the same time. Wow, that's going to be cool. Because
It's a
they're and when you look at them, they're the green is a little brighter. The words evergreen are in these giant block letters that God knows what are they 100 feet tall, the letter.
good.
And then here are some of our old favorites. This Texas Triumph, the Triton, and the Talos are all from that 20 ship class
Correct.
that you were talking about earlier. So it's nice. So when you get Evergreen back and you get Maersk and MSC coming back on a regular basis, I mean, that's just that's great news.
Agreed.
Let me find where the heck are. Oh, okay. There we go. So 2 ships into Seagirt next week with over 1,000 imports each.
Timestamp 21. Look at minute 21.
Okay.
That was my note. That's all.
For edit. And then, like I said, 5 days next week with 2 container ships each day. So that's really cool. So while we're here, shipping update. This is, a little bit different to talk about, but so we have. If you're paying attention to the port and you're watching on a live stream camera, we get a ton of these Wallenius Wilhelmsen, these green and black Ro-Ros that come in and bring a lot of car imports. The Dundalk and Fairfield. And so something a little different came in. It's the Wallenius Marine, it said on it, not Wallenius Wilhelmsen. The livery was like the old livery, like white and a lighter green with white on top and green below. It almost looks like a flashback to the past. And the ship was called the Future Way. And it came into Trade Point, which Wallenius Wilhelmsen doesn't typically do. And then under that, on the side of the ship, it said towards truly sustainable shipping. So everybody that's listening to the podcast, have your homework, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to go down the rabbit hole and figure out what the heck that means. I haven't had the time to figure it out, but I'm sure there's
somebody
if there's a different paint job and they've got a big message on the side of the ship, I figure there's a reason.
There's a reason for it.
There's a reason for it. I just haven't researched it yet. And then earlier this week, Console was closed. So Console is one of the 2 coal ports, coal terminals that we have in town. One is in Canton, so right next to Ruckert, kind of right across from Fort McHenry, and then the other one is just inside the Key Bridge in Curtis Creek. So Console in Canton was closed for a few days, and we found out that the ship loader needed repairs.
Okay.
So it's nice to have some folks that are in the industry that can give us some details about what's going on.
Okay.
And then in the things that may only interest Mike, right? Because so I didn't know this for a long time. So when you see the ships on the live stream and you see the cranes come down and you can see that there's 2 or 3 or 4 cranes working a ship at the same time I call it box picking, to load and unload the containers, that I didn't know until I went on the BISC cruise like 2 years ago. Wound up meeting some guys from Ports America, because they're always on that cruise, and it's not but it's about 30 people that it takes to run that crane.
Wow.
And I don't, there's one guy driving, right, doing the driving in the cab up there, hundreds of feet up. But I mean, there's a lot that goes on to make a crane run. And so there's 30 people for each crane, approximately. It doesn't work out to just 30. It's not like 30, 69. But, and so earlier this week, you know, we've got an insider that gives us some information every once in a while. And he was saying, hey, you know, we all saw the ship go over and be docked at Seagirt, and he said, "Oh, you know, they're not going to work that until 8 o'clock in the morning." But I see the cranes coming down, and so I thought, if the crane's moving, the whole crane gang is there. You know, and like, well, wait a minute, this doesn't add up. You know, what do you mean they're not working it till 8? You know, it's before 7, and the cranes are coming down. And he says, "Oh, there's a crane department, and they will lower the crane and put it in position." I don't know that that's true. Maybe they just lower it to get it ready like a couple hours before, so that it's ready to work when the time is on the sheet that they're to start working each ship. So.
Gotcha. So to me, it sounds like when I was running the restaurant in college, you know, I would look at scheduling and go, okay, well, I've got certain labor requirements for certain hour,
lunchtime rush, breakfast rush, whatever.
I gotta bring my cook in at 8 o'clock in the morning to be ready for 11, but I don't need the server in until 10:30 kind of situation. That kind of to me sounds like that, but there's multiple roles for labor with, around crane operations. And so you want to bring in certain people at certain times to, get the cranes set up and ready and in position so that those who are trained to do other jobs can come in. So there are different jobs with, that are required to get these cranes up and ready and to be operated. It's not just one person who's got the joysticks and running the whole thing.
Right.
There are lots of different positions, and then they get trained within to scheduled to come in and do those specific jobs when the time comes for that job to be handled.
Right. Okay, I think that's it with the shipping updates.
You got
we really
there was a little bit of movement on the Ready Reserve fleet,
right? Yeah,
this week, and some talk, and you got some updates on a
little bit. I really wanted to cover this in more detail, but I ran out of research time. So remember, we had the Antares that left. So the 2 Ready Reserve ships that were in North Locust Point. So they're kind of between Fort McHenry and Domino Sugar, and they kind of point across the way to kind of Canton Fells Point. And they're pretty much, they've been 2 of the most steady ships, right? When you look at the 6 ships and the 3 different locations, it seems like the other location seems to move a bit more than these 2, for whatever reason. And then one of my port insiders told me that they were both leaving for good. And so the Antares left, and supposedly that was going to Texas for scrap. I guess it was just so old. It's just, and most of these ships are old, and they do have trouble running them. And then the Denobula left. Now, when the Antares left, they towed it out of here. So they didn't want to spend the money to spin up the engines, because that takes, and then staff it up a little bit, because I think there's a skeleton crew, and then if it's running, there's another level, and then if they're deployed, there's another level.
Correct.
I think that's correct. And so when the Antares left, I guess they didn't want to do any of that, so they brought an outside tug crew in, and they towed it down to Texas. And that was 10 days ago. It might be there now. I haven't been tracking it. But then about a week later, the Denobula left, and as she approached the Bay Bridge, she lost power. Where have we heard that before. So that doesn't give any of us a warm fuzzy at all.
Right.
And then, obviously, because of what's happened at the Key Bridge, they shut down the Bay Bridge, like out of an abundance of caution. And there were tugs, I guess, shadowing her. They weren't attached. And then they were able to spin it back up, get it working. They went under the Bay Bridge without incident, went to Anchorage. Then I think they needed a Coast Guard approval to keep going. They got that approval the next morning, I think, and they were out of here at like 8 a.m. the next morning.
Right.
But that's a little scary. And, of course, people were talking about, how could this happen again? And why weren't, and so for me, this brings up that whole ready reserve fleet and how, it's hard to keep ships reliable that are 40 years old that are just sitting around and nobody's using them.
Right.
They don't even run them out. I don't know what. I'm not a shipping expert. I'm just a guy who's fascinated by it. What would be, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head for this. What would be a reasonable requirement? So, okay, each one of these ships, you should run them out to sea for like a day. What, every month, every 3 months, every 6 months, just to make sure that you get the problems ironed out so that if there was something that they were needed for, because there are plenty of stories where these ships have gone on deployment, for lack of a better term, for a mission to deliver some goods somewhere, and they've broken down.
Sure.
And so it helped me bring up, with, seeing people talk about this on Facebook and all these different places, and how can this happen, and why did this, and, hey, well, did you realize that these ships just sit around? There's really not enough money for them. And, some people will say, well, what do we do? Write your congressperson, because.
Sure. So there's a couple of things with the ready reserve fleet. So in the previous summers where I've had secondary high school teachers come in to do a professional development in and around the port. We've toured some of the ready reserve fleet ships that were stationed here. I believe we went 1 year, a number of years ago. We went on the Denoblo. We've been on the Wrath. The Washington that was up at Covington, or what do we call it now? Baltimore Peninsula. Yeah.
We're not participating in the renaming of.
Okay. All right. But some of the things that they said was they do have this skeleton crew that keeps the ship operational.
Yeah, I think it's 5 or 7 or 8 or something.
And they do that group does their general maintenance. They do their routine firing of the engines and the electrical systems and comm systems and those types of things, just to keep the ship potentially ready to go in the case that they are called to activate.
Right.
There are some sea trials. They do go, and I don't know what the periodic time is in between those, but they do fire them up and run them out for a couple of days and bring them back in order to do that. It's either 6 months or a year. That 6 months kind of rings a bell from that tour, but I could be wrong on that.
You might be right.
And if we scrap them all, then we don't have that bandwidth to be able to operate in certain theaters. If there's a hurricane and there's an area that needs supplies, that's a very easy, quick, efficient way to get those products to those environments. So it's not necessarily just for wartime effort.
Right. Because you have these ships that we do have staged around the coast, or on both coasts, right? And they're theoretically ready to go.
Correct. if I remember correctly, on the Washington tour that we took,
Mm-hmm.
um,
And we
that
did
was
one of
actually
those also.
correct. They actually said that that was actually a commercial ro-ro ship that the government had purchased and
Yes.
then painted to resemble the rest of the
And
Ready
I think
Reserve fleet.
a lot of them are. As a matter of fact, I think
Mhm.
the Antares and the Denobula were both they were both container ships.
Correct. And
Yeah.
so when you look at um, you know, we're talking about them being scrapped or or being
Mhm.
some type of final resolution. They've now had two lives that these ships have gone through. They've gone through the commercial life and they've gone through the Ready Reserve fleet life, and
Right.
so they really are at the end of their useful life in this. And we don't want them breaking down during during whatever deployment effort it is that they're going through. So
Right.
those are the things that we do have to take a look at.
So maybe as they're moving these two ships out of here, maybe there's, as a matter of fact, I know there's a modernization effort. I think you and I had talked about that maybe in one of the earliest podcasts, how that turbo activation
Yeah.
from, what was it, 6, 7, 8 years ago, that what ran out a majority of the ships by definition, and then there was a significant amount of them that broke down or couldn't run or couldn't stay running for the appointed, whatever it was, 1 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And it just kind of illustrated, and I think there's been plenty of people in the industry and the military who have said, we've got this problem. What are we going to do about it? Because one day we're really going to need them. And then, because wasn't one of them was deployed for the Gulf
Yeah.
theater and had to be towed one way or the other with all this stuff on it because it broke down. I mean, um, we
It's
all
definitely
don't like seeing money wasted, but I think it's a good way um, to have some resources ready to go, because you can't. I mean, if there's an emergency,
you need them
you
available.
can't have the army or whatever taking over a ship. Okay, unload all this stuff. We don't care where you put it. We're taking over your ship. Let's go. I mean, we've got to have some stuff. We've got to have some resources that are ready to go.
Yeah.
And I guess we're trying to make them more ready to go by modernizing them. So we'll see what ships we get, and maybe we'll talk about that. Hey, let's compare the two ships that left and their
Hmm.
ages with the two ships that we wind up getting to replace them, and see if, did we get ships in here that are 10 years newer, or,
Sure.
I don't know.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
There was a meeting about the Key Bridge demolition.
Yes.
That,
So we did talk about that last week, and we covered that. But then I did find out about kind of what happens to make that work, right? So, just a real quick overview. The Maryland Transit Authority requested a tidal wetlands license and a water quality certification. So those two things will allow crews to demolish the remaining structure of the bridge. Um, and so what does that mean? What do those two things mean? The wetlands license and the water quality certification. So this is what happens. The Department of the Environment reviews the license. The MDTA needs that license for demolition, which includes the wetland license and water quality certification. Then those go to the Board of Public Works for final approval.
mm,
Right. So we kept talking about, okay, we're doing this Key Bridge rebuild. We're doing it on this, pre-approved fast track system. And then we see weeks later that they have this meeting, and then we learned behind the scenes that there are like another 3 steps Okay, you had to have the meeting. Now you have to get these things filed and approved, and then they can start the demo work. So it is interesting to kind of peel back the onion and see the layers of how these things work.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I see people on socials, well, why haven't they started this yet? Well, this is why, and I wanted to kind of highlight the steps that are happening in the background that
Yeah. From a layman's terms perspective, now honestly, I've not looked specifically at what the wetland license and the water quality certification do related to bridge demolition. But
right,
if you just look at just those titles, yeah, you got, if you bring a bridge down, you've got, in a controlled environment. I'm not talking about the accident,
right, right,
because they're not going to, they're not going to plan for an accident and they go, oh, did you get your wetlands license before you bring the,
right, right.
the but the in the controlled environment, you are going to be dealing with the wetlands right along the shore, and then the water quality in and around where that where those the bridge scraps are going to be around there is going to be stuff that falls into the water. Okay.
Yeah,
So there has to be, even in a controlled environment where we have to get this bridge rebuilt, we still need to
mm-hmm.
be mindful of the environmental aspects of it. We just can't just go gangbusters and make a big mess. Okay. Because
Mm-hmm.
there are consequences to those actions. So you still need to go through these certifications and follow whatever the processes and procedures are, even in this particular situation.
Sure.
So demolition's supposed to start this summer or fall. So we should be pretty, even though we're having to go through these steps, we should be starting to see some movement on this here pretty shortly.
And you know what I found? Maybe we'll talk about this next week. I found so it was the MDTA, right? And it was the Department of the Environment. And so in the meeting, and it was covered on the news, and then they showed these giant poster boards and these giant graphics that they had set up, and I forget where it was. Was it in a school or a library? I'm sorry, I don't remember. And some really cool graphics that were set up, and I'm thinking, oh, now how can I get my hands on those so we can show those for the podcast? And I think people would be really interested.
Mm-hmm.
And I wound up finding basically a detailed description of how they're going to demo. Like there's like a whole plan
Oh, okay.
for the whole thing, even the salt shed under the
Mm-hmm.
eastern and it's all written down. And so we could do a podcast.
Just on the demolition
And I
process.
know I'm always joking about that, but really, maybe we should
Okay.
do a whole podcast just running through those graphics that are available online, and talking about how each section will be demoed, how each one. I mean, there's a plan, even for taking down the old dolphins.
Okay.
With the original drawings. And since I'm a draftsman, anytime I see a drawing, I'm like home, and a smile comes over my face. Right. So some really interesting stuff that, to be honest with you, we didn't have time to prepare for this week, but maybe we can get that on for next week. Because did I send that to you? Did you have a chance to take a look at that?
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay. Maybe I didn't send it to you. Sorry about that. But yeah, some really cool details, because, it's that kind of stuff, the really intricate details seem to be always kind of behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. And then we find out about it like a day before it happens. So to have these things readily available that we can look at and see and know what they're doing before they're going to do it, and that there's a whole detailed plan for the whole thing, and it's all detailed out and done already, is quite fascinating. So I would love to cover that maybe next week.
Okay. Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
The John Brown has published a lot of pictures and updates over the past week.
Yep. A lot going on there. A lot going on. So let me see. Where do we want to start? Gosh, there's so much. They've put out so much great information in the last week. Gosh, let's see. Where do we want to start? Let's start here. All right, let me see. Let me try to. So I'm just doing this on the fly. Instead of preparing things for me to maybe cover and write down with bullet points and then have pictures saved. So I'm just gonna go on Facebook here and just show you what I see. So this was from 4 days ago, and they're talking about taking the chains and totally what's the word, pay them out, so they totally loosen the chain, lay it out on the deck. Check this out.
That's a lot of chain.
Yeah, let me see if I can get this any better. Yeah, it's a little better. Yeah, and then see how they paint them so that every so often, so when they're out on a cruise, and then when they see this color go by, then they know, okay, that's another 100 feet. It's actually right up here. Let me see if I can get back. Here we go. So today our volunteer crew concentrated on the anchors and chains. Both chains had their shots marked, and the anchors lost a few pounds of marine growth, rust, and old paint. A shot of anchor chain is 15 fathoms or 90 feet.
90 feet.
Each shot. So every 90 feet is marked with a code in red and white. So the deck force knows how much chain is paid out. So lots of maritime lingo here, which is we should be using because we're supposedly self-interested in this maritime stuff. So we should at least sound like we know what we're talking about to the people that actually do this stuff for a living. Those yahoos, they don't know what they're... So the shots are relayed to the bridge by bell signals, old school way. So that you can, right? And along with a 21st century radio message. Yellow is used instead of white to indicate you're almost out of chain. So some kind of cool pictures here. Let me see if I can. So here they're working on the anchor. Here we showed this. So look at this. It's just
you can see all the shot marks.
Yeah.
Use the term.
Look at you.
I know, right?
Now this is the anchor locker where it all goes. So you can imagine just my engineering hat comes on without me even trying to put it on. And then, so each link weighs how much? Every 90 feet weighs how much, right? And then, so how structurally supported does this box have to be to have all this weighted chain in there? Oh, and then, of course, the chain is wet because it's been in the water. So there has to be holes in the bottom. And where does that drain? All right, I'll stop.
No, that all makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, the fascination with how things work, right? So here's some stuff going on with the prop. Okay, let's see if we can go to another day. Oh, these are really cool.
Oh, the night shots of the dry dock. Yeah.
Check that out. I wish I could show it, bigger, but this is a portrait shot, not landscape.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to use my influence. Hey, could you guys do like more landscape shots? It fits better on the pod. Yeah, that's a really cool photo. Some more photos. You're just talking about all the things that they're doing, and sometimes they're so busy. Like the crew is, there's, I don't know how many. So there's many people who just came back to Baltimore from the rundown. but there's some crew there that are actually helping. Some days they're so busy that they don't have time to do like a Facebook update with a cool
Sure.
write up and all these pictures. But so here's the guy. Here they are bringing the anchors back up, and they say spraying the chain with preservative. And they have to wait for the shipyard riggers to help move the anchors with a forklift. And they said it's nice not to drag 8,400 pounds of steel across the dry dock deck.
Wow.
Right? So the stuff you don't think about, right? And so let's take a look at this photo. So here's the John Brown in the dry dock. But remember, this dry dock is practically a ship itself.
Correct.
It's a floating dry dock. So they go down there, and they've been to a Kiwanis shipyard several times. This is where they normally go, and so this is what fascinates me. So you've got to have these supports under the ship in the right place, and obviously they have a map of that and how they get that ready. And then, through ballasting, this dry dock goes underwater, and then the ship comes in, and then they have divers to make sure it's lined up correctly, and then they pump it back out and it raises back up out of the water. So you're not just talking about the cement bottom of something that theoretically you can't hurt. We're talking about steel structure of another ship that you don't want to mess up by dragging your 8,400-pound anchor across.
Correct.
So when you think about what it takes, so you've got the chain all laid out on the dry dock, and then you're painting it, and then you got to get it all back in there. And what does that? So now you've got to have a forklift that's big enough to pick up this anchor high enough so it doesn't drag. So as they're slowly bringing it in, you're slowly moving it closer. Just again, I know people are probably just all right, shut up, Mike.
It's a significant effort to try to make sure it's not, you're not just pulling the ship up along dock, throwing the tying it up and then pumping water out. There's a lot of physics that's involved in making sure that the ship doesn't topple over.
There's that.
I've even seen a
talk about burying the lead.
Well, I've seen a video where in port there was a ship that flipped because of the ballast tanks weren't properly balanced with the freight, and so these things do happen. So you have to go through the physics associated with making sure that the ship is set up properly for the dry dock to operate correctly.
Right. And then I thought this photo was interesting, and I'll tell you what I think this is, and I'm just guessing. I've never welded anything in my life. I've never been in a ship dry dock in my life. Oh, that's not true. Okay. So I think what these plates are, see these little plates? And I think they used, because this is a replacement plate here in the middle. And I think they have to, maybe this was one of the ones that was custom made, custom fabricated that they needed to replace. Okay, so you take these small plates and you tack them in place to hold the bigger plate in so that you can weld that in place. And then I guess you knock or weld these little plates off, and then you can, finish your weld and grind it all the way around and make it complete. That's my educated guess as to
that is all correct.
Okay.
That is the process that they're going to go through, and it's to ensure not only that the replacement piece of metal is flush with the rest of the ship hull, but it also helps in making sure that those those new welds are completed in the proper manner, and that they've done the non-destructive testing that they have to ensure that the welds hold and those types of things. And then so those brackets are in place to make sure that the new piece of steel gets put in properly.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. And there's all kind of really cool details and how they're talking about these tanks that they never see, because they never get to go down in there, and how it had this like tubing like warming system because the fuel that the ship used to run was
Yes.
so thick it actually had to be heated so that it could get pumped through the engine. I mean, just interesting stuff. And then here's some really nice photos.
Some more night shots.
Right. And this, I think she's partially painted here now. So the
Oh, yes.
upper
Okay.
hull, look at that. How cool is that? The new paint just shining. So kind of cool. And then I did see this one. I wanted to. Okay, I guess we're kind of done with that. There was a nice little write-up that I wanted to talk about, but I can't seem to. This is what happens when you do this stuff on the fly and you don't prepare.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I'll stop sharing. But they talked about how some of the really interesting things or hard to do was so there are some places where they have to replace some sections of the hull. And then the size, the thicknesses that they made the steel in those days aren't available now. So they have to, right. And so they have to go to the next size up and weld that in place. And then you think about, okay, but the hull isn't perfectly straight everywhere. And so now they have to take this, for what would, you probably couldn't fit it on your dining room table, and nor could your dining room table support it.
True.
This chunk of steel that looks relatively small in those pictures, but if it was in your house, oh my God, right? And then they have to roll it to match the curvature of the hull. So you're not just talking about, okay, Jimmy, go get me, cut this piece of steel to this size. It has to be rolled to match this curvature. Now, of course, but I really wasn't thinking about that. So the capabilities of the shipyard are pretty extensive, pretty interesting, I thought.
So some of the time that a couple of the opportunities that I got to go in to see some of my father's work when he was working down at the shipyard in Charleston.
We should talk about that sometime.
Yeah, we can chat about that in a future. But to see some of
the hobbyist.
Sure.
I'm just a hobbyist. You actually have maritime history in your family that you grew up around.
Well, to see some of the
your family used to eat, breathe, and sleep this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we should talk a little about Kipp's history one day.
Yeah, we can do that. There is quite a bit of interconnectivity, actually on both sides of my family. So we could
maybe just one podcast. Don't
just one. I'm not but going through some of the shops over there, and one of the lathes and some of the equipment, could be 2 to 3 stories tall, that he was working on just to deal with some of the propeller shafts and the other flange repairs and things like that. So it's quite the large size of opportunity to have to deal with some of this specialized equipment and the specialized solutions. So, yeah, sure.
Hey, we're almost to the end here. I wanted to do an audible because I've had this open on my computer. So I'm a big boy. I know how to bookmark stuff. I wasn't born yesterday, but I didn't want to close this down because I thought it was so cool because, we've been doing this Shipwatcher thing for 7 years. And then somebody, I think, found this for me, and like, so this is what I'm talking about the stuff that's behind the curtain, if you will. Let me see if I have a way to enlarge this. I don't think I do. I don't see a way to enlarge it. But anyway, so here is Maryland Port Administration general cargo for the port.
Now,
And you can
now,
see
where did you find that? Did you just was
this is
this?
on maryland.gov. I found it. I mean, I could probably no, I can't back up. But
No, but I noticed that it says sign in button. So this you're not signed into anything. This is open.
no. This is public.
This is public information. Cool.
Maybe I should put this on the website, huh?
Okay.
Like when we show those bar graphs of the truck transactions,
Mhm.
I don't know if that's just available to industry folks and then they're posting it on
Understood.
Facebook. I don't know, and I haven't found it readily available to us. But so anyway, so here was March. So these are monthly figures for auto, ro-ro, forestry, steel, other,
Wow.
total, imported, exported, imported empty, exported empty, total TEUs, total container. I mean, just broken
Wow.
down.
All right there.
Wow. I mean, we could have a podcast for each column. But anyway, so you're looking at these numbers: 700,000, 700,000, 700,000, 620 in March.
Well, that's
because we lost a few days in March
correct.
because the bridge went down. And then look at April. Look at these zeros here. Look at these zeros here. Now, I'm not trying to,
It's factual data. I mean,
yeah.
I get the emotional factor or the sensitivity around
Right.
that, but it's actual numbers. It tells a story.
Right. To actually, because we've been talking about things going back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then I think some of us may have exposure to metrics at our job. And, you have that person who's all about the metrics and the numbers and and maybe they get on your nerves. Maybe some of us have seen that before. I don't know. But then, but then to actually see the real numbers, okay, now I'm the crazy metrics guy and I'm getting fascinated because you can actually see this in real time, what the real numbers are. And then, so look at this. Here's 1,800. So what is this? Let's look at this. Container tonnage. This first column. I guess I could be looking at over here. This, let's pull this out. Total general cargo tons. So, all right, we were in the 900,000s for months. March was a little off because we missed some time. Then April, whack, down to 1,800 tons, which sounds like not a lot, but not when you consider 1 million back in October.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can start to see the slow recovery: 195,000, almost 400,000. And I have refreshed this. And so the last month available is June. I don't know when the July data comes out, but
sure.
we'll keep checking that. And it'll be really interesting to see what that looks like.
Agreed.
So I thought that was some interesting real-time data that we can put our hands on, that we can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think I'm just saying that would be some good data to be able to link on the Shipwatchers website.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I think we're almost done. Do you have?
I think that's the only other thing. I think he had some suggestions sent in, and so somebody had suggested maybe some means for us to collect information, not just on Facebook or within the YouTube chats, and we we do try to monitor those and try to respond, because but there's so many platforms and it's just us.
Right. Exactly.
I think that you've come up with a solution.
Right. So if you have podcast ideas, suggestions, corrections, oh my God, don't ever do that again. Email Mike at baltimoreshipwatchers.com. But seriously, suggestions or corrections, if we got something wrong, the whole point here is to be disseminating correct information. So, whatever you want, comments, questions, concerns, suggestions
I will,
for new ideas, Mike at baltimoreshipwatchers.com.
and what I will suggest is the same thing that I tell my students when they have to complete an instructor evaluation form.
Mm-hmm.
Don't write
All fives
well,
for
no,
Kipp Smith.
don't give me all fives, but also don't just write he sucks. I hate him.
Right.
That doesn't help me whatsoever. If you tell me, hey, he sucks because he does this,
Right.
that's helpful to me. So
These
constructive
podcast guys are losers.
no,
Please
that doesn't.
elaborate now.
Yeah, explain because that doesn't help me to fix that. So, the constructive criticism is important. That
Mhm.
if there's something, explain it. We're here just trying to provide information that the general public probably needs to know or wants to know. But just saying, "Hey, I hate you," doesn't help us to figure it out. So we just ask that you provide, some helpful information or suggestions on that.
What was that?
And
What was that? Was it the NFL or was it one of those like startup leagues where the guy like they could put whatever they wanted on their jersey? Remember?
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah,
hate me on his.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You can even though it says Mike at, you
Yeah.
can still send your Kipp problems to at Mike. It will make sure that I get them. All
Yeah.
right.
All right. So, in closing, just kind of a refresher, or a Facebook group with almost 16,000 people who are interested in the port. So, lots of information, a great, friendly, helpful community that you can participate in. I know some folks are Facebook shy, for lack of a better term. They don't want anything to do with it. But our Facebook group really is a nice, friendly, helpful learning environment. We've got kids and ladies in there, and it's a nice place. And frankly, I won't tolerate it any other way. So people love it. So check it out.
Absolutely.
We also have our website, which you saw, which has the links to the podcast, the live stream, ship schedules, port maps, and so just wanted to highlight. So we've got these cool coffee cups with our Key Bridge logo, which kind of sad that it's gone, but you can have, and then the other logos on the other side. We have some hats with the logo on it also. Now, this is just a printed hat, but I'm kind of a hat snob, sort of, and I don't want a hat that looks like junk.
Sure.
So when we participated with Bonfire and I saw that it's just a printed hat, I'm like, I don't know what that's going to look like. And this actually looks like this is a higher quality hat. It looks better than the stuff that we had embroidered through a different company, let's just say.
Okay. All right.
And then T-shirts. We have all different color T-shirts with the logo, right?
Okay.
And I mean, this was when I designed this logo and I was working with, I was paying to have it designed. I'm like, you got to get this thing right because it is going to be big on the back of a T-shirt. Right. So
nice.
Different color T-shirts. There's ladies T-shirts. There's V-necks. I hate to even think about that fall is even on our minds. I really don't. But we do have sweatshirts.
Sure.
So if you want to prepare for fall, And then don't forget that we're still donating 25% of the proceeds to the Baltimore International Seafarer Center. Some of you liked when Josh Messick was on, head of the Seafarer Center, and talked about everything that went into a seafarer's life and what they were about and how they what went on with them while this bridge was down and they were stuck here. He is the head of that organization, and they are with people constantly and helping them out in all different kind of ways. So whatever we can do to help them. So 25% of their proceeds for all this swag goes to the Seafarer Center.
Nice. And I know that Reverend Josh appreciates that, and there's a lot of good work that he and the Seafarers volunteers or the group that are doing to help the the maritime community and those seagoing folks coming in and out of the port.
Right. So contrary to the Mike plan of flying by the seat of your pants and sitting down in front of this thing and just barely getting it done every week. So now I talked to Josh this week about having him on again because he was talking about some of the details about the dolly crew, right? And how he sees them almost every day. He has some of them volunteering with him at the Seafarer Center.
Wow.
Right. And so I think folks would love to hear some details about what's going on with these folks.
Oh, yeah.
I talked to Josh about joining us this week, and then I promptly dropped the ball. So maybe we'll have him on sometime soon.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
So back to socials. We're on Twix. Shout out Amy Lawrence. That's her little moniker because I don't know. She's trying to be funny and combine Twitter and X, and she called it Twix. Instagram. So Twix, Instagram, Yahoo. YouTube. We are under Balto Ches on any those three. So when we talk about the podcast on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell to be alerted to new podcasts as they come available.
And if you want the audio version of this, you can listen to it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Sounds good. All right. I think that's all we got for this week.
I think that's about it.
All right.
Hope everybody has a good week this week.
Yes, that sounds good. Hope everybody does.
Count it off. 3, 2, 1. Happy Shipwatching.
See,
you'll have a good week.
Really good. Right. And then when we watch it, we'll be. I know it's
fine.
Like you said, we're gonna have to have it. We're gonna have to can it and just add it to the end someday, and then we'll be sitting in a different place, wearing different clothes. I don't know how we're gonna do it, but all right, everybody, have a great week. Thanks for listening,
everybody.